Another day, another parade of pathetic prisoners shuffling before my bio-throne. Honestly, conquering galaxies used to be fun, but now? Now it's just tedious. Mind-numbingly, soul-crushingly tedious. I shift on my throne, feeling the living metal adjust to my movement with that disgusting squelching sound it always makes. Wonderful. Even my furniture is annoying me today. The grand throne room stretches out before me, all black marble and glowing purple veins running through the walls like some kind of cosmic infection. Very dramatic. Very intimidating. Very boring after you've seen it every single day for the past 15 years. Your Majesty, drones Admiral Vashi, his voice carrying all the excitement of a funeral dirge, the next batch of prisoners from the human colony ship Defiance. Oh joy, more humans. Because that's exactly what I needed to make this day complete. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing personal against humans. They're actually quite entertaining when they're not busy being conquered. But seriously, how many times can you watch the same song and dance? They resist, we crush them. They beg for mercy, we ignore them, they get executed or enslaved. Rinse and repeat across 17 different star systems. The massive doors groan open, because of course they do. Everything in this palace has to make dramatic sounds. Can't just have normal doors that open quietly like civilized beings. No, we need the full theatrical experience every single time someone walks in here. 6 guards march in, dragging 3 prisoners between them. 2 females, 1 male. The women look terrified, which is understandable. Most beings find my appearance somewhat off-putting. The purple skin, the 4 arms, the glowing yellow eyes, the fact that I'm roughly 9 feet tall when standing. I get it. I'm intimidating. It comes with the territory of being a galactic empress and all. But the male? The male looks annoyed. It's not scared, not desperate, not even particularly concerned about the whole about to be executed by an alien queen situation. Just annoyed. Like someone woke him up from a really good nap to drag him here. How refreshing. He's human, obviously. Brown hair that looks like he cut it himself with a plasma torch. Brown eyes that keep rolling in the most disrespectful way possible. And a face that suggests he finds this entire proceeding beneath his notice. He's wearing the standard orange prisoner jumpsuit, and there's grease under his fingernails. An engineer, probably. They always have that particular brand of stubborn irritation that comes from dealing with broken machinery all day. Brandon Torres, Admiral Vashi reads from his datapad with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Chief engineer aboard the Defiance, charged with sabotage, rebellion, and insulting Her Majesty's appearance during capture. I raise one eyebrow. He insulted my appearance? Yes, Your Majesty. He called you, and I quote, a purple nightmare with an attitude problem. Well, that's certainly direct. I almost smile but catch myself. Can't let the court think I'm going soft. Though I have to admit, purple nightmare isn't entirely inaccurate. I've been called worse, but rarely with such casual honesty. Brandon Torres shifts his weight, and that's when I see it. As his sleeve rides up slightly, there's a mark on his left forearm. Scar, actually. Not just any scar, but a very distinctive lightning-shaped scar that runs from his wrist halfway to his elbow. A scar that I remember with perfect clarity because I was there when he got it. My breath catches. All 4 of my hearts skip a beat simultaneously, which is quite the feat. The throne room suddenly feels smaller, the air thinner. That scar, that impossible, unforgettable scar. It can't be. It absolutely cannot be him. The odds are astronomical. I've conquered 47 worlds and encountered billions of beings, and now, after all these years, he just happens to get dragged into my throne room as a prisoner? The universe has a seriously twisted sense of humor. But there it is. That jagged lightning bolt permanently etched into his skin, courtesy of a power conduit explosion 20 years ago on Kepler station. An explosion that happened because he was saving my life. So it was you, I whisper, my voice carrying across the silent throne room. After all these years. Brandon Torres looks up at me then, really looks at me for the first time since being dragged in here. His annoyed expression shifts to confusion, then recognition, then something that might be resignation. "Oh, come on," he mutters, and I can hear the exasperation in his voice even from across the room. "Really? Of all the alien queens in all the galaxies, I had to get captured by you?" The court gasps. Admiral Vashi reaches for his weapon. "But me?" I start laughing. 20 years ago, I was Princess Zephara, third in line to the throne and absolutely convinced I knew everything there was to know about ruling an empire. Spoiler alert, I knew absolutely nothing. But try telling that to an 18-year-old royal who'd been raised on stories of conquest and glory. My first diplomatic mission to Kepler station was supposed to be a simple show of force. Roll up with a massive fleet, wave our superior technology around, make some threats, accept their surrender, then head home in time for dinner. Easy. Boring, even. Father had insisted on sending me with General Kraftnog and a full security detail, because apparently even visiting a peaceful mining station required half the royal guard. Kepler station was one of those joint operations where multiple species worked together mining rare crystals from the nearby asteroid belt. Humans, Altarians, Vexians, even a few of my own people who'd gone legitimate. Very cosmopolitan. Very cooperative. The kind of place that made hardcore imperial types like General Kraftnog break out in hives just thinking about it. "Your Highness," the station commander had said, some nervous human with sweaty palms and a twitchy smile, "welcome to Kepler station. We're honored by your presence." Honored, right. More like terrified, but I appreciated the effort. The tour was going exactly as planned. Boring speeches about mining quotas, tedious explanations of safety protocols, and lots of bowing and scraping from the locals. I was already planning my excuse to cut the visit short when everything went sideways. The first explosion took out the main power grid. The second one blew a hole in the station's outer hull. The third one made it pretty clear this wasn't an accident. Pirates. Someone screamed, which was both obvious and unhelpful. The station's emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in that lovely shade of panic red. Alarms started wailing, people started running, and my elite security detail started looking around like confused children. "Your Highness," General Kraftnog shouted over the noise, "we need to get you to the ships immediately." Excellent plan, except for one tiny problem. The docking bay was currently on fire. Also, there were about 30 heavily armed pirates between us and safety. Minor details, really. What happened next still makes my blood boil. My supposedly loyal, supposedly brave, supposedly elite guards took one look at the approaching pirates and decided that discretion was the better part of valor. They ran, all of them, left me, their princess, standing in a corridor with nothing but General Kraftnog, who was busy having what humans call a panic attack. "This way, Your Highness." He wheezed, dragging me toward what looked like a maintenance hatch. "We'll hide until reinforcements arrive." Hide. The future empress of the Zephirian Empire, hiding in a maintenance shaft like some kind of scared rodent. The indignity of it all was almost worse than the actual danger. Almost. The maintenance shaft was exactly as glamorous as it sounds. Cramped, dark, filled with pipes that dripped unidentifiable fluids, and decorated with the kinds of smells that would make a garbage processor weep. I was crouched there in my formal diplomatic robes, trying not to touch anything too disgusting, when I heard footsteps in the tunnel behind us. "Well, well, well," a voice said, and it definitely wasn't speaking any language I recognized as friendly. "What do we have here?" General Kraftnog made a sound like a deflating balloon and promptly fainted. Wonderful. My chief military advisor, everyone. The real inspiration in times of crisis. The pirates found us, naturally. 3 of them, all armed, all looking very pleased with themselves. They dragged us out of our hidey hole and were in the middle of discussing my potential ransom value when the lights went out completely. Emergency power failure. The whole section went black. That's when I heard another voice in the darkness, human male and absolutely dripping with sarcasm. "You know, most people knock before entering someone else's workspace. But A plasma cutter ignited, casting weird shadows on the walls. Behind it was a human in maintenance coveralls, maybe 20 years old, with the kind of smirk that suggested he found this entire situation personally amusing. The pirates spun around, weapons raised, but the human was already moving. What followed was less a fight and more a demonstration in creative uses for maintenance equipment. Plasma cutters, it turns out, are very effective against pirate armor, especially when wielded by someone who clearly knew every inch of the station's layout. "Princess," he said once the pirates were no longer a concern, "I'm Brandon Torres, engineering crew. And unless you want to stay here and wait for more uninvited guests, I suggest we find a better hiding spot." No bowing, no formal address, no trembling in the presence of royalty. Just practical advice delivered with a grin that said he was actually enjoying this whole mess. "You do realize I outrank everyone on this station?" I said, because apparently my ego needed feeding even in life-threatening situations. "Yeah, well," he replied, stepping over an unconscious pirate. "Right now I'm the guy with the plasma cutter and the working knowledge of how to get out of here alive. So maybe we can discuss the chain of command later?" We spent the next 4 hours crawling through ventilation shafts, emergency conduits, and maintenance tunnels. Brandon knew every shortcut, every hidden passage, every way to avoid the pirates who were systematically searching the station. And the entire time he kept up a running commentary that had me torn between laughing and throttling him. "Careful of that junction," he'd say. "Voltage regulator's been acting up all week. Probably won't kill you, but you might lose a few tentacles." "I don't have tentacles." "Right, sorry. Arms. You might lose a few arms." It was when we reached the central power distribution hub that everything went wrong. Or right, depending on your perspective. The pirates had planted charges on the main power coupling, probably planning to take out life support and force a quick surrender. Very efficient. Very ruthless. Very likely to kill everyone on the station, including us. "Can you disarm it?" I asked. Brandon was already pulling panels apart, his hands moving with the kind of confidence that comes from years of fixing impossible problems. "Probably. But someone's going to have to reroute the power flow manually when I cut the main line. And that someone is going to get a very unpleasant surprise when the backup systems kick in." "How unpleasant?" "I think lightning bolt, but more personal." He looked at me then, and for the first time since we'd met, his expression was completely serious. "Your Highness, this is going to hurt a lot, and there's a decent chance it might kill whoever does it, so maybe you should." "Just tell me what to do," I interrupted. He stared at me for a moment, then that impossible grin came back. "Yes, ma, I am. When I say now, grab that coupling and twist it counterclockwise. Don't let go no matter what happens." The explosion, when it came, lit up the entire hub like a miniature star. Brandon caught the worst of it, the electrical discharge arcing through his body and leaving that lightning-shaped burn down his left arm. But even as the power coursed through him, even as his hair stood on end and his muscles locked up, he was laughing. Actually laughing, while being electrocuted. Note to self, he gasped as the power finally cut out. "Next time, let the princess do the dangerous part." We got the charges disarmed. The pirates got arrested when station security finally showed up, and I got a lesson in what real courage looked like. Not the parade ground heroics I'd grown up admiring, but the kind of stubborn, sarcastic, absolutely fearless determination that kept going even when everything was falling apart. When it was time for me to leave, Brandon walked me to the docking bay. His arm was bandaged, and he moved like everything hurt, but that grin never wavered. "Thanks for the adventure, Your Highness," he said. "Try not to get kidnapped by pirates again anytime soon." "Thank you," I replied, and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. For everything. He shrugged like saving a princess was just another day at the office. All in a day's work. Besides, someone had to show you how the other half lives. I never saw him again. Never even knew his last name until today. But I never forgot the human who looked at a scared princess and saw someone worth saving. Someone worth treating like an equal instead of a title. 20 years later, and I still remember every joke he made while risking his life for mine. The laughter dies in my throat as I realize the entire court is staring at me like I've completely lost my mind. Which, to be fair, I might have. Queens don't laugh when prisoners insult them. Queens certainly don't laugh when prisoners act like they know them personally. And queens absolutely do not dismiss their entire court because they want to have a private conversation with a human engineer. But here we are. Everyone out, I command, my voice carrying that particular tone that brooks no argument. Now, Admiral Vashi looks like he's about to argue, which would be a first. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to. I mean to have a private conversation with this prisoner, I interrupt, rising from my throne to my full 9-foot height. Unless you're questioning my judgment, Admiral? The threat in my voice is unmistakable. Vashi's face goes through several interesting color changes before he bows stiffly. Of course not, Your Majesty. We'll be right outside if you need us. I'm sure you will be, I say dryly. Take the other prisoners with you. And Admiral, close the doors, all of them. It takes nearly 5 minutes for the throne room to clear out completely. 5 minutes of meaningful glances, worried whispers, and the kind of dramatic door closing that only happens in royal palaces. Finally, it's just me and Brandon Torres, standing in a room that suddenly feels far too large and far too quiet. He hasn't moved from where the guards left him, but his posture has changed. Less defeated prisoner, more curious, like he's trying to solve a particularly interesting engineering problem. Well, he says finally, this is either going really well or really badly, and I'm honestly not sure which. I step down from the throne platform, my footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. You don't recognize me. It's not a question. Of course he doesn't recognize me. 20 years ago, I was a teenage princess with delusions of grandeur. Now I'm a 9-foot-tall alien queen with purple skin, 4 arms, and enough body modifications to make a Vexian surgeon weep with joy. The transformation isn't exactly subtle. Should I? He asks, and there's that same fearless curiosity I remember. Most beings would be cowering by now. Brandon Torres looks like he's genuinely interested in the answer. Kepler station, I say, watching his face carefully. 20 years ago. Pirates. A very uncomfortable maintenance shaft. His eyes widen slightly, but he still looks skeptical. Okay, that's oddly specific, but half the galaxy knows about the Kepler station incident. It made the news feeds for months. The news feeds didn't mention you making jokes while being electrocuted, I point out, or calling me Your Highness in that particularly sarcastic tone you're still using, by the way. Or the fact that you said someone had to show me how the other half lives. Now I have his attention. Brandon stares at me for a long moment, his expression cycling through disbelief, recognition, and something that might be horror. No, he says slowly. No way. You're telling me the scared little princess I pulled out of that maintenance shaft grew up to become, he gestures vaguely at my throne, my palace, my entire empire. This? Empress Zephara, the conqueror, I say with a slight bow. Terror of 3 sectors, destroyer of worlds, crusher of rebellions. Though most people just call me Your Majesty these days. Oh, come on. Brandon throws his hands up in exasperation. Really? Of all the alien queens in all the galaxies, I had to get captured by the bratty princess I saved 20 years ago? What are the odds? Approximately 14 billion to 1, I reply automatically. I had my mathematicians calculated once. I was curious. He stares at me. You had mathematicians calculate the odds of meeting me again? Heat rises in my cheeks, which is problematic when you have purple skin. The blush is noticeable. I may have been slightly obsessed with probability calculations for a few years after Kepler station, but slightly obsessed. There might have been charts, and graphs. Brandon starts laughing, and it's the same laugh I remember. Completely unrestrained, totally inappropriate for the situation, and somehow infectious enough that I find myself smiling despite everything. So let me get this straight, he says, wiping his eyes. You became a galactic conqueror, built an empire that spans multiple star systems, and spent part of that time making charts about the possibility of running into me again? When you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It's absolutely, completely, wonderfully ridiculous. He shakes his head, still grinning. Though I have to say, the whole terror of 3 sectors thing is quite the career change from scared princess hiding in maintenance shafts. People change, I say, settling into a more comfortable position on the steps leading up to my throne. What about you? Still fixing impossible problems with inappropriate humor? Pretty much, he admits. Though these days I'm mostly fixing problems you caused. Chief engineer with the human resistance. We specialize in making your life difficult. The irony hits me like a plasma bolt to the chest. You're with the resistance. Yep. The resistance that's been sabotaging my supply lines for the past 3 years. That would be us. The resistance responsible for the destruction of my mining operation on Tau Ceti. Guilty as charged. I lean back against the throne steps, suddenly feeling very tired. So, not only did I capture the human who saved my life 20 years ago, I captured him while he was actively working to undermine everything I've built since then. In my defense, Brandon says, I didn't know it was you I was undermining. If I had, I might have been slightly less thorough about it. Slightly? Okay, probably not. But I would have felt worse about it. The silence stretches between us, filled with 20 years of divergent paths. I became everything I was raised to be, a conqueror, an empress, a force of nature that reshapes star systems according to my will. He became exactly what he was on Kepler's station, someone who fixes things, who protects people, who makes jokes in the face of impossible odds. So, he says finally, what happens now? I mean, this is awkward even by my standards, and I once accidentally insulted a Vorthan ambassador's mother at a peace conference. Now, I consider the question, turning it over in my mind like a particularly complex engineering problem. Now I have to decide whether to execute the leader of the human resistance or spare the life of the person who saved mine. And I'm discovering that 20 years of absolute power hasn't made that decision any easier. Brandon nods thoughtfully. You know, most people would just flip a coin. Most people aren't responsible for the stability of a galactic empire. True. Most people also don't owe their lives to the guy they're thinking about executing. Also true. Plus, I'm much more useful alive than dead. Dead engineers don't fix things. I raise an eyebrow. Are you trying to negotiate for your life? I'm trying to make this easier for both of us, he says with that same easy grin. Because honestly, this whole situation is giving me a headache, and I'm not even the one who has to make the impossible decision. Despite everything, despite the weight of empire and the expectations of my court and the simple fact that he's an enemy of the state, I laugh. Because some things, apparently, never change. Brandon Torres is still making jokes while his life hangs in the balance, still treating impossible situations like minor inconveniences, but still acting like we're equals instead of empress and prisoner. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what I need him to keep doing. The problem with being an absolute ruler is that people expect you to make absolute decisions. Quickly. Decisively. Without standing around in your throne room having philosophical debates with prisoners who should have been executed an hour ago. Unfortunately, nobody mentioned this particular scenario in Empress School. A soft chime echoes through the chamber, followed by Admiral Vashi's voice over the comm system. Your Majesty? The court is concerned about the delay. Protocol dictates that enemy combatants should be processed within standard timeframes. Processed. What a lovely euphemism for execution. Protocol can wait. I snap back, probably with more venom than necessary. But I'm conducting an interrogation. Of course, Your Majesty. However, General Kraftnog wishes to remind you that public executions are scheduled for noon, and the citizens of New Zephara are expecting a show. A show. Right. Because that's what this has become. My empire runs on fear, and fear requires regular demonstrations of power. Public executions aren't just justice, they're entertainment. They're reminders of what happens to those who oppose the crown. They're also, apparently, scheduled programming that can't be delayed because people have plans. Tell General Kraftnog that I'm aware of the schedule, I say through gritted teeth, and tell him that if he interrupts me again, he'll be joining the afternoon program. Silence from the comm. Good. Sometimes it's nice to remind people that absolute power means I can have them executed for annoying me. I turn back to Brandon, who's been listening to this exchange with obvious amusement. So, he says, sounds like you've got a busy day planned. Public executions, citizen entertainment, the usual royal activities. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing that you've built quite the efficient system here. Very organized. Very theatrical. The way he says theatrical makes it sound like a criticism, which it probably is. Everything about my empire is theatrical. The dramatic throne room, the elaborate ceremonies, the public displays of power. It's all designed to impress, to intimidate, to remind everyone exactly who's in charge. But sitting here, looking at Brandon Torres in his prison jumpsuit with grease still under his fingernails, I'm suddenly wondering when impressive became exhausting. It's necessary, I say, though I'm not sure if I'm trying to convince him or myself. Here maintains order. Order maintains peace. Whose peace? Everyone's peace. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've got a lot of unhappy people who are only peaceful because they're too scared to be anything else. I want to argue with him, but the words stick in my throat. Because he's not wrong, is he? My empire is peaceful the way a graveyard is peaceful. Quiet because there's nothing left alive to make noise. You don't understand, I say finally. You don't know what it's like to be responsible for billions of lives across dozens of worlds. Every decision affects millions of people. Every sign of weakness invites rebellion. Every moment of mercy gets interpreted as vulnerability. So mercy is weakness now, in my position? Yes. Brandon tilts his head, studying me with those infuriatingly perceptive eyes. You know what I think? I'm sure you're going to tell me. I think you've been telling yourself that story for so long that you've started to believe it. The words hit harder than they should, because there's truth in them, isn't there? 20 years of absolute power, 20 years of making the hard choices, 20 years of crushing rebellions and maintaining order through strength alone. When did I stop questioning whether it was necessary and start assuming it was inevitable? So what would you have me do? I ask, and I hate how defensive I sound. Release all my prisoners? Disband my armies? Let the galaxy descend into chaos because an engineer thinks I'm being too harsh? I'd have you remember who you used to be. Who I used to be was a scared princess hiding in a maintenance shaft. Who you used to be, Brandon corrects gently, was someone who cared more about doing the right thing than doing the safe thing. Someone who was willing to risk electrocution to save a space station full of strangers. That was different. How? I open my mouth to explain, then close it again. Because how do I explain that being responsible for an empire changes you? That every kind impulse has to be weighed against political consequences? That mercy is a luxury I can't afford when millions of lives depend on my strength? How do I explain that somewhere along the way I stopped being Zephara and became the Empress, and I'm not sure I remember the difference anymore? So, Brandon says into the silence, does saving your life 20 years ago come with a get-out-of-execution-free card? Because I have to say, this whole moral dilemma thing is making me nervous. And just like that, he's done it again. Made me laugh when I should be making life or death decisions. Made light of a situation that could determine the fate of my empire. Made me feel like a person instead of a position. When was the last time someone made me laugh? Really laugh. Not the polite amusement I display at court functions or the satisfied chuckle when an enemy falls into one of my traps. When was the last time someone looked at me and saw Zephara instead of Empress Zephara the Conqueror? The answer is sitting right in front of me, making jokes about his own execution. My empire is built on fear. Fear of my power, fear of my wrath, fear of what happens to those who oppose me. But Brandon Torres has never been afraid of me. Not when I was a princess. Not now when I'm an empress. He treats me like an equal, like a friend, like someone worth joking with instead of someone to be terrified of. And I realize, with a clarity that's both startling and terrifying, that I can't kill him. Not because of gratitude, though that's certainly part of it. Not because of some misguided sense of mercy, though that's there too. But because he's the only person in the entire galaxy who remembers that I used to be more than just a conqueror. The only one who looks at me and sees potential for something other than fear. The only one who still calls me by my name instead of my title. Admiral Vashi, I say, activating the comm system. Yes, Your Majesty? I cancel the execution. A pause. Your Majesty, you heard me. Cancel it. But the prisoner is a known resistance leader. The people are expecting. The people will get their show another day, I interrupt. This prisoner is now under my personal protection. The silence from the comm stretches so long I wonder if Vashi has fainted. Finally, his voice comes back, carefully neutral. Understood, Your Majesty. And the charges? I look at Brandon, who's watching this exchange with obvious fascination. Dropped, I say. All of them. Your Majesty, I must protest. The security implications alone are my concern, not yours, I finish firmly. The decision is made, Admiral. I cut the comm before he can argue further, then turn back to Brandon, who's staring at me like I've grown a fifth arm. Well, he says finally, that was unexpected. So unexpected doesn't even begin to cover it. What I'm about to do next will probably go down in Imperial history as either the most brilliant strategic decision or the most catastrophic lapse in judgment of my entire reign. Possibly both. Admiral Vashi, I call over the comm again. Assemble the full court in the throne room. Immediately. Your Majesty, the court is already assembled. We've been waiting outside for. Then stop waiting and get in here. The doors burst open like someone lit a fire under the entire royal court. Admiral Vashi leads the charge, followed by General Kraftnog, Quartermaster A, and roughly half the Imperial cabinet. They all look various shades of confused, concerned, and mildly terrified. Good. I like keeping them on their toes. Your Majesty, Admiral Vashi begins, his voice carefully controlled, about the prisoner's status. Ah, yes, about that. I rise to my full height, letting my presence fill the room the way I've been trained to do since childhood. I have an announcement. The court falls silent. Even the usual whispers and shuffling stop completely. You could hear a pin drop if pins made any noise when they dropped, which they don't, but the metaphor stands. Brandon Torres, I declare, gesturing toward the human who's still standing there in his prison jumpsuit looking like he's watching a particularly interesting entertainment program, he is hereby appointed as my personal strategic advisor. The silence that follows is so profound I'm pretty sure several people have stopped breathing entirely. General Kraftnog's face cycles through approximately 17 different colors, none of them found in nature. Admiral Vashi's mouth opens and closes like a fish experiencing existential crisis. Quartermaster A makes a sound like a broken atmospheric processor. Your Majesty, General Kraftnog finally manages, his voice pitched roughly 3 octaves higher than usual. Surely you don't mean to appoint a known resistance leader to your personal staff? I mean exactly that, I reply smoothly. Who better to advise me on resistance tactics than someone who's been using them against me for years? It's not entirely a lie, it's also not entirely the truth. But it's a reasonable enough explanation that my court can't immediately object without looking like they're questioning my strategic wisdom, which they are, but they can't say so out loud. Besides, I continue, warming to the theme, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, as the humans say. Brandon, who has been watching this entire exchange with obvious amusement, finally speaks up. Well, he says, that familiar grin spreading across his face, this is either the best or worst career move of my life. Probably both, I admit. Definitely both, he corrects. Though I have to say, the benefits package is probably better than the resistance offers. Do I get my own quarters, or am I sleeping in the dungeon? You get quarters, I say, trying not to smile too obviously. Supervised quarters. With guards. For my protection or everyone else's? Yes. The court is still staring at us like we've both completely lost our minds, which we probably have. But there's something liberating about making decisions based on what feels right instead of what's politically expedient. Something refreshing about having a conversation that isn't filtered through layers of protocol and formal address. Something terrifying about realizing that I've spent 20 years building an empire of fear, but I've never been able to conquer my own gratitude to one sarcastic human engineer. Your Majesty, Admiral Vashi tries one more time. The security implications are manageable. I cut him off. The decision is final. I look around the room, meeting each shocked gaze with calm authority. Unless anyone has specific objections to my strategic wisdom? No one speaks up. Smart choice. Excellent. Admiral Vashi, see to Advisor Torres's accommodations. General Kraft Nog, brief him on current resistance activities. And everyone else adjust your expectations accordingly. As the court files out, still muttering among themselves, Brandon steps closer to my throne. So, he says quietly, what happens now? Now? I settle back into my throne, feeling oddly lighter than I have in years. Now we see if the most feared queen in 3 sectors and a wise-cracking human engineer can figure out how to run a galaxy without killing each other. Should be interesting. That's one word for it. I watch him as he's escorted out by a thoroughly bewildered honor guard, and I can't help but smile. I've conquered 47 worlds, defeated countless enemies, and built an empire that spans multiple star systems. But after all these years, humans still find ways to surprise us. Some things, apparently, are unconquerable.